Welcome back. This is Module 3 of the training series focused on the Section 8 Management Assessment Program, also known as SEMAP, for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. The purpose of this training is to provide an overview of SEMAP and key information to help PHAs effectively manage their Housing Choice Voucher Program for SEMAP success. Each module of this training is self-paced and can be started or stopped at any time. In the remaining modules, we will be discussing each indicator in greater depth and providing key information to add to your PHA toolkit to manage your HCV program for SEMAP success. Module 3 will provide a closer look at indicators 1 and 13, which are related to managing intake. HUD's two-year tool can help PHA staff maximize leasing through planning. The tool will help PHAs analyze, reconcile, and assess leasing numbers regularly and throughout the year by tracking all the factors and metrics that impact leasing. You can use the two-year tool to pull VMS data and manipulate different scenarios in order to achieve the maximum number of SEMAP points. You can develop leasing strategies in accordance with the highest possible SEMAP outcomes. The voucher utilization rate indicates the percentage of HCV units that are leased or the budget authority expended during the last completed calendar year. When determining the voucher utilization rate for SEMAP, HUD will calculate both rates and use the rate that results in the highest lease-up utilization percentage. In order to determine the utilization rate using the percent of units leased method, take the total number of unit months leased during the calendar year and divide that number by the number of unit months available based on the baseline number of units available at the beginning of the calendar year. To calculate utilization via the percent of budget authority expended method, take the total amount of budget authority expended during the calendar year and divide by the budget authority authorized at the beginning of the calendar year. When determining the utilization rate, litigation units and funding, new unit funding increments, and VASH units should be excluded from calculations. However, PVVs and homeownership units are included in this indicator. Each PHA must outline in its administrative plan how it will place families on the waiting list and in what order they will be selected from the waiting list. PHAs may choose to list families in order of the date and time in which they applied, or choose a random method of selection, such as a lottery. Additionally, PHAs may choose to add preferences to the selection of families from the waiting list, or simply choose them on a first-come, first-served basis. Selection could also include the selection rules of a specific voucher funding source. For instance, VASH program participants are selected from referrals from the VA. Other programs with their own selection criteria include the Family Unification, Mainstream, and non-elderly disabled voucher programs. Waiting list preferences allow some families a priority spot on the wait list. Some common waiting list preferences include families displaced by a government action or a natural disaster, those with individual emergencies, and victims of domestic violence. Any preference the PHA establishes must not violate fair housing and equal opportunity laws. While these preferences affect the order in which a family is selected from the waiting list, they do not determine eligibility. If a family is selected from the waiting list early because of a claimed preference and is then determined to not qualify for that preference, they will be returned to the waiting list at the position they would have held if they had not claimed the preference. HUD establishes income limits by family size for the area in which each PHA is located. These income limits are used to determine the family's eligibility for the program at the time of admission. Annual income is not compared to the income limits after the family's initial admission to the program. HUD publishes the income limits by counties and metropolitan areas. There are 3 income limit schedules: low income limit, or LI, which is 80% of the AMI, very low income limit, or VLI, which is 50% of the AMI, or extremely low income limit, ELI, which is 30% of the AMI. To be eligible for the program, the family's income may not exceed 50% of the median income for the county or metropolitan area in which the family chooses to live. The extremely low income limit, also known as ELI, is used only for income targeting. It is never used for eligibility determination. HUD requires PHAs to make sure that at least 75% of the families admitted to the HCV program have incomes that do not exceed the extremely low income limit. A PHA may not skip over an ELI household that has reached the top of the waiting list. The 75% requirement is for the combined HCV and Project-Based Housing Choice Voucher, or PBV, programs administered by a PHA. Most programs meet this threshold without difficulty. When a PHA is unable to meet this requirement, HUD allows certain exceptions. A PHA may admit less than 75% of families meeting the ELI limit if the PHA has opened its waiting list for a reasonable period of time, the PHA provided appropriate notices and outreach to attract ELI households, there are not enough ELI households to meet the 75% requirement, or admitting more very low-income households addresses the worst-case housing needs for their area. To be prepared for success for Indicator 1, PHAs should ensure they have the following items ready: selection from the waiting list at fiscal year end, waiting list pulls for the fiscal year, and new admissions for the fiscal year. Along with this information, PHAs should be prepared for a QC review of original application, waiting list selection notice, waiting list eligibility, voucher and HAP contract, and waiting list denial notice. Next, we will be discussing Indicators 3 and 10 related to determining eligibility and continued eligibility. PHAs are required annually to recertify participants' income. The annual family income used in calculations is an adjusted income, including deductions of certain costs, and may include certain types of exclusions. When calculating family income, 3 types of incomes are included in the calculation: unearned income, which includes regular periodic benefits like Social Security, pensions, and disability benefits. Other unearned income includes unemployment, welfare assistance, and alimony and child support. Next are earned sources of income, such as wages, self-employment, and military pay. And last, income from assets, such as income earned from accrued savings. This last category is the least commonly applicable to the HCV population. Here are the most common types of income that are excluded from calculations: earnings of household members under the age of 18, payments for foster care, live-in aid earnings, as the live-in aid is not considered a household member, training stipends, adoption assistance, and any other type of income that is considered federally excluded. PHAs must verify household assets on an annual basis. Only assets in excess of $5,000 will be counted towards income. Specialists will use the current passbook savings rate to calculate earnings from assets over $5,000. Households can also deduct certain categories of expenses from their gross income in order to obtain the adjusted annual income figure that is then used to calculate tenant rent. Eligible exclusions include unreimbursed medical expenses in excess of 3% of gross annual income, and unreimbursed child care expenses. This child care must be used to enable a family member to work or pursue higher education. Also eligible for deduction are unreimbursed attendant care and auxiliary apparatus expenses for disabled family members. The Indicator 3 toolbox includes ensuring your PHA has the following at the ready for fiscal year end: administrative plan provision verifications, listing of assisted families, utility allowance schedule and payment standard schedule, current and prior fiscal year, and file review checklist for each file. This ends Module 3.